Oh.
Okay. Would everybody mind just turning their speakers off? Whilst.
You mean just to mute?
Just to mute, yeah.
Just to mute when we're not talking.
Yeah. This is Liz, and that's everybody else. Yeah. Everybody else has got it off. So yeah, hello everyone. It's really good that you've all come this evening. So yeah, this is just part of the Community Food Network. So I'm sure quite a few of you I met on Friday already and other days. So the Community Food Network is working with any initiative in Dumfries and Galloway that's working for the community and is by the community. So such as emergency food provision, community gardens, and food education programs. So we've just started these online events and meetups just to try to get people networking and connecting and seeing people from different projects across the region. We did our first one, it was back in August, and that was on the recruitment of volunteers. So if any of you want to actually missed that and want to look back, we haven't got a recording of that session, but we wrote a summary of it, and it's up on the website for you to have a look at whenever. So yeah, if you want to see that. So yeah, this is going to be on dignity and food provision tonight. And so to begin with, we're just going to have introductions of everyone, if you're all okay with that. Just a little hello and what project you're working for, or what you want to get from tonight. Just one little sentence. And then we'll hand it over to Irina, who's working with Nourish Scotland. And then we'll have Tim Cowen speaking from Woodlands Comunity. And then, so if everybody just waits for questions at the end of the two talks, if that's okay with everyone. And then we'll have a discussion and everybody can chip in and yeah, ask any questions that you have at the end. So would anyone like to start the introductions? Leslie, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Leslie. I coordinate the Glenkens Food Hub, which started a kind of 8-month pilot scheme in May, and we coordinate sustainable, good local produce from within 30 miles of the Glenkens and offer online platform shop where people can order from all these different growers in one order, and we kind of collect all the stock and coordinate into a box, and people either come and collect it or we deliver it, and they pay for this service. And we're looking to see how we can get people who can afford to pay forward, so that we can use extra funds to support either the food bank or a discount to people that might be in food poverty or such like. So that's kind of why I'm interested in what's being said tonight. Is that okay?
Hiya, I'm Roger. I volunteer at Sandside Community Garden in Dumfries. I'm here tonight to find out just what about food dignity is, because I've never heard the expression before. So it should be interesting. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Liz. I volunteer at Summerhill. We bake bread for our community and our pantry, and we use Scottish organic wholemeal flour from Scotland, the bread, which comes as a solidarity bag. So people pay money forward, and we're gifted a bag to make bread with, and we do that on a Monday. And I also started a bread club called Delicious, and we meet at the stove once a month on the third Wednesday. And the idea, it was started in 19, and the idea was to bring bread making to everybody, but in particular people who are at disadvantage in the food system, because there's lots of people who'd love to maybe go off and do a course, but they obviously don't have the funds. And at the bread club, then we're able to offer wholemeal flour to people for their baking to help support, keep them baking. Okay.
Can I go next? Liz, you'll be pleased to see I've got my bread rising here. I'm just trying to hug it to get it warm enough to rise.
I know we were a bit later today because it's getting colder. So what are you making?
It's a sourdough.
With what? Just,
It's mixed with wholemeal wheat and white wheat, organic. Yeah.
so what flour do you use?
Wholemeal and organic, and yeah, I got it from Green City, big sack.
Oh, yeah. Would you be interested in trying Scotland the bread flour?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I might have tried it. Yeah, definitely. Yes, so it's just rising. I don't know if you can see it. Possibly. This is my liqueur. It's a little
I've seen
honey
these.
bowl. Anyway, I won't get too distracted just now, but I thought I'd go next. Yeah, so I'm Lucy. I live in Gatehouse of Fleet, and I've been a permaculture educator for a long time. Yeah, so doing various different things, including like outdoor education stuff. When you try to cookie for your bread. And yeah, excited to be doing the community network work now. I'll pass to Natalie. Oh, you're on mute. I can't hear you.
Natalie, you're on mute.
That would help, sorry. Natalie Guillaume, Community Health Development Practitioner based in the Maccas, so I cover the Maccas, but I'm also leading with my colleague in the Reens. We're leading on the Food Providers Network. So basically just, here to meet up with everyone and see if I can pick up any tips to pass on to the food providers. I'll pass on to Ellis.
Hi, I'm Ellis. I volunteer at Sandside Community Garden. I just came along tonight just to find out about different aspects and different types of what happens with different foods. And I'll pass on to Paul.
Thanks, Ellis. I'm Paul, Country President, Sandside Community Garden Project, Dumfries. I started the project 7 years ago, and I gave it growing food for the Forage community. Thank you. I'll pass on to you.
Just Mary, I think now, hasn't.
Hi, I'm Mary Pattison. I'm in Whithorn and I've got two hats on tonight. I'm a trustee at the South Maccas Community Centre, and the people who are actually dealing with the community fridge there and that kind of thing cannot be here tonight, so I'm here to represent them. And I'm also here on behalf of MacCan, which is Climate Action Network here in DG8. And at my home, we have the MacCan Croft, where we are helping people to learn how to grow food sustainably. So we have an orchard, polytunnel, forest garden, and the volunteers who've been here for about a year now are learning no dig and perennial veg growing for starters.
Sorry, I forgot I didn't introduce myself as well at the beginning there. So yeah, I'm Clara, and I'm working with the Community Food Network, and I'm also working on the Regenerative Farming Network. I also, when I've not got Propagate hat on, I work on a dairy farm, and I also help with forest schools as well in the area. So lots of different things. Yeah, so I'll pass now on to our first speaker, who's Irina. Who works with the Dignity in Practice program with Nourish Scotland. So yeah, Irina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. And Clara, thank you very much for inviting me. It's really great to see these groups coming together and developing. And is that something, you know, that we learned over the last few years, that partnerships and cooperation and learning from each other really is very effective. So yeah, I've been to a few groups across Scotland, so it's just really nice that team, you got a team now, which is good. Yeah, so as you see, as Clara said, my name is Irina. I work for Nourish Scotland, and I used to work for Pete, for the team in the past, so we know each other quite well. So yes, I'm here to talk about the Dignity in Practice project that I've been involved in for the last 4 years. I'm going to try to make it quite interactive, and I'm going to be show you some videos and maybe use some Menti. I don't know if you've used Menti before, and or if you don't have access to use Menti, you can use the chat to engage with us on. I'll try to make it not kind of like a presentation, but as interactive as possible. And in order to introduce and provide a little bit of background about the project, I'm just going to show you a video that we made before the pandemic. So you can have a look at that. I'm just going to share my screen if that's okay with you. Can everybody see that? Yes.
Yes.
Brilliant. So yes, the theme of today is how can we provide dignity in food provision. So hopefully at the end of this kind of like presentation or engagement, I will be able to give you a few tips on how to do that. And I will begin by showing you a video that is a visual example of what the project is about. So I'm just going to play that.
Scotland is taking important steps to promote dignity in response to food security. In 2016, with increasing referrals to food banks, the Scottish Government committed to a rights-based approach to ensure everyone could afford and access the food they needed with dignity and choice. The Dignity Project is a partnership between Nourish Scotland and the Poverty Truth Commission. We wanted to understand how community food groups could promote dignity in their everyday work. We learned that dignity is often in the detail, and all community groups can take small, practical steps that will help make a difference. Working with community food initiatives from across Scotland, we learned that organisations can help put dignity at the heart of their work by asking 5 questions. How does this work support people to feel a sense of control, able to take part in community life, nourished and supported, involved in decision making, valued and able to contribute? These 5 questions form the basis of our dignity principles in practice. Communities cannot provide the solution to food insecurity. However, everyone can be involved in promoting dignity, and communities across Scotland are coming together to show how this can be done.
Sorry. It makes me always so just emotional to have a look at that video. A lot of those images were taken from Woodlands Cafe, where I used to work at that time. Yes, as you can see, you know, it's really lively, it's community-led. Food is always really important, and people that with lived experiences are involved in those decisions and in those projects. So as the video said, we work alongside with people with lived experiences. So we are partners with the Poverty Truth communities, and we have a team of 2 members from Nourish and 4 members from the Poverty Truth communities, and they help us to co-design our work and every single step that we do. So there are a couple of aims. The beginning of the project, there were quite specific two aims, which was to explore what the dignity principles mean in practice for community food provision, and to support community food providers to reflect on and transition their practices towards responses to food insecurity that promotes and restores dignity. So we work with community food organizations across Scotland, including Woodlands Community Cafe, and they help us kind of like inform and keep us grounded that we are doing the job that is needed, and we are learning with each other, and we're using the right language, and we're engaging the way that is helpful. In fact, we meet once a month, and everybody is welcome to attend. So, Clara, if you are interested, I can send you the email for people to register if they wish to. Every month there is a new theme, and organizations come across Scotland. This week, I think the Glasgow Food Network is presenting and running a workshop, in fact. So it's going to be slightly different than a normal meeting. So as you can see, not only just the principles, but we have lots of videos and lots of tools and resources that help organizations kind of like practice and develop their practices towards more like kind of like dignified services, and help you like kind of like to review your services, and everything is in our website. So I will share with Clara where you can find those resources. And just to begin, I think maybe we can practice one that we've used quite a few times in a lot of our workshops that we ran before. So for this activity, if you don't mind, it will be good to, I'm going to go, we're going to use Menti. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so we can get into Menti. If you can go to www.menti.com, and then I'm just going to tell you the code is 87853731. I wonder if you are if you're able to do that. If you are not able to do that,
could you repeat the code again, please? Oh, you've got it there.
I'll copy and paste it.
It's
I
saying
copied
it's,
and pasted it, but that's wrong.
it's saying it's wrong.
Yeah, it's saying it's wrong. Sorry, I was trying to be helpful by putting it in the chat, but whatever I put in was wrong.
Yes, Paul, you can use the chat for sure, and maybe Clara, you can help me read if anybody adds in the chat.
What's the code again? Because
It's not working.
87853731 is what I
No,
put.
it work.
That's wrong. So
I have a link here. Maybe if you click the link, you will be able to.
Can you put it in the chat?
Yeah.
Usually the link works better, I think.
Here is the link.
That should work, I think.
Right. So it's a very simple question. What does dignity mean to you? And you have a few options. So I'm just going to share my screen so you can see what you're responding to. So the question is, what are the first words that come to mind when you think of dignity? I'll give you a few seconds, a few minutes.
Is that working for everyone?
Yeah.
Oh, can you see my screen as well?
Yeah.
No.
I see it. adding in the chat there, Paul added kindness and Mary added listening.
Great, thank you for sharing that. So yes, so people are just, I think that everybody is able to share, which is great. So people are saying that dignity is about compassion, is feeling valued. Dignity is about kindness, is about listening. Dignity is being non-judgmental. Dignity is about choice. Without shame and peer level. And there is respect as well. So the bigger the word, the more people have said the same word. So this, we can see here that is compassion, respect, to feeling proud. So that's what dignity is. I'm going to ask you a slightly more challenging question. And, you know, I can't see anyone. But anyway, so I'm just going to ask you a slightly more challenging question. And this is not a food context, in a food context, but anything in your lives. I would like you to think of a time that your dignity might have been undermined. And I would like you to share, what did you feel? What was the feeling like when your dignity was undermined? And that could have been maybe at school, or while you were walking in the street, or at work, or have you ever experienced your dignity being undermined? And what did that feel like? I am aware that, you know, this can be quite difficult for some people to think of a situation that it was not pleasant. So thank you very much for sharing that and reflecting on a time that,
Irina, we've got in the chat embarrassment and nervous and sad as well.
Thank you. So think of a time your dignity might have been undermined. What did you feel like? So I'm just going to say really slow what people have been sharing.
Someone else, sorry, in the chat said mad.
Mad.
Yep.
So what did you feel? People felt ashamed. People felt angry, embarrassed, sad, frightening, powerless, threatened. There's another one here, embarrassed, misunderstood. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. They are quite strong words. They are quite sad words, to feel powerless, to feel ashamed. It can leave scars that can shape your life forever, because, you know, you still remember that feeling, and still that is with you. So the point of this activity, there are a couple of purposes why we do this activity. And the first one, it brings us into a common sense of humanity. It's not about them, it's not about us. We are all humans, and we are all equal, and we all have feelings that can affect our well-being. So it brings the room in a sense of equality and humanity, because we have all experienced, or we have had an experience in the past that undermined our dignity, which is just not right. Then another purpose of this activity is to realize that as organizations, as individuals, as members of our community, we have a responsibility to make sure that dignity is at the heart of absolutely everything that we do. Because we don't want anyone feeling those words that we have just shared. And unfortunately, that's what happens when people access food as charity. We need to be aware that people that come to access food, they are already incredibly vulnerable. They already have health issues, family issues, finance issues, and on top of everything else, on top of everything that they have to deal with, they need to access food as charity. Food that may not be, it may not even be a choice. It may not be what they want to eat. So that's why dignity is just so important to reflect on. And also to put ourselves in that person's shoes, but not assume that what is good for me is good for somebody else, because we are all individuals. We are all have our likes and dislikes, and we need to consider that. Third purpose of this activity is to let you know that's how the principles were developed. We traveled across Scotland and visited organizations that were practicing, that they had good practices, and one of them was Woodlands Community Cafe. And we learned from those, we ran this activity and many more that you have access in the website. And throughout this engagement, we developed the principles. And I'm just going to share my screen again, because I do have a PowerPoint presentation for that. So you can have a look at the principles yourself. So and you know, every time we run this activity, it's always the same. People know that dignity is about being trusted, being seen as an individual, being listened to, feeling valued. So this is how the dignities were, the dignity principles were developed. People need to have like a sense of control, having the power to make choices about what, where, when, how, and with whom you eat. Also, people like to be able to take part in a community life. We all have something to give. And when you're accessing some services, you also want to kind of like contribute towards that community. So how can you involve people in decision making? How can you encourage participation by the members that need your services? How can you hear their thoughts and they have a view of how you run your activity? Also, it's about being nourished and supported and feeling valued and able to take able to contribute. And I'm just going to finish with a short a quote that we really like, and is that putting dignity into practice requires us to think carefully about all the factors that affect how someone feels when they visit a community food project. The decisions we make, small or large, as both staff and volunteers, will have an impact on how someone feels about the space, situation, or the way they are treated. Therefore, it is important to recognize that dignity is in the detail. The Dignity Project have gone through quite a long journey, and us, like in every single community, we were hit by COVID, and we had to kind of like change the way we work like everybody else. But there was a lot of rich learning in this. We ran the emergency food provision dignity during COVID-19 online workshop, where there were like over 400 organizations took part. We learned, like many other organizations, that partnership and collaboration really works, and that local authorities do have the power to make changes and should always engage with the community. like this network, there's been lots of developments of food networks across Scotland, and the importance of participation. How can we involve people with lived experiences in the decisions that we make? So we are engaging, and they are current. So yeah, there's been quite a lot of rich learning in the last few years. But something that kind of like the key messages that we had from people is that at the end of the day, no matter how well, this learning was due to the frustration that a lot of community food organizations felt, because putting dignity into practice is not easy. You need, as you heard in that quote, it's all about the detail. It's about thinking carefully. It's about communicating. It's about engaging with your community. And sometimes even though you are trying your hardest, when food is seen as charity, it's just not good enough. And that's a learning that we've had over the last few years. There is a real desire to move away from charity models and towards sustainable responses to food insecurity. So these responses should be framed within the right to food and food systems approach, because we need sustainable change, and we need to move towards that direction. And I think with the Good Food Nation Bill and many other initiatives that are happening, I think we are progressing, but that needs to be in our mind when we think about food, and that is the to think about the right to food. Another one, well, the key question of this meeting today is, so what can you do in your organizations tomorrow? It's not that we think it will take a long time in order to really see the changes. However, you can do lots of different things tomorrow when you meet your volunteers, when you meet your team, when you are running your community food service. And one is that we should think about cash first approaches. There's been a recent report on tackling food poverty. There are 24 million pounds not used that should go towards benefits, but because people don't claim those benefits, there is like 24 million pounds not being claimed. So how can we get people informed about what they are entitled? And then another thing is to embed the dignity principles in your practice, and you are really welcome to go into our website and look at all the kind of like activities that we have, and we are always quite happy to kind of like support. I hope, and that's it. Thank you. I hope I didn't go over the time that I was supposed to, Clara.
Sorry, I was muted. Not at all. That was amazing. Thank you, Irina. It's very interesting. Sorry, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Irina. That was really inspiring. Thank you very much. So I'm going to just introduce, well, I'm sure Tim will introduce himself, but Tim Cowen is the manager of Woodlands Community Garden in Glasgow, and actually now lives in Dumfries and Galloway. So he's got a foot in both camps in Wigtown.
Yeah.
Looking forward to hear.
Yeah. Thanks, Lucy. My name's Tim. For the last 11 or 12 years, I've been working for Woodlands Community Development Trust in Glasgow. About a year and a half ago, I moved out to Wigtown in Dumfries and Galloway. So I work 3 or 4 days a week from home here in Dumfries and Galloway, and 1 or 2 days a week in Glasgow, which is a really nice balance. I'm going to share my screen if that works. So, hang on.
Yeah, that's good. We're seeing it.
Okay, so Woodlands Community Development Trust, we're a charity in Glasgow. We're kind of the bit between the city centre and the West End. in Woodlands area. We started 12 years ago with a community garden, but we've expanded quite significantly since then. So here's actually a list of what our current projects are. We have a community garden with a community meeting room and events terrace. We run a community cafe and a veg box scheme, and I'll talk mainly about the veg box scheme today. We also, for the last 18 months, have run an anti-racist community library. We have a whole series of community cycling initiatives, doing work with families and particularly with baby group. And we run 2 projects around mental health, including one looking at families and climate anxiety, a whole program of health and wellbeing events, and also do environmental work. So we started 12 years ago with a community garden with just 2 part-time staff. We've now got myself as a full-time manager and I think 10 part-time staff. But what I'm going to mainly talk about tonight is our food work. And Irina was a colleague for a number of years in our community cafe. So since December 2014, we ran a 3 community cafe. We've done it in different venues and in different formats, but when it worked best before the pandemic, it was a Monday evening meal. We had 10, 12, 15 volunteers preparing a 3-course vegetarian meal. And we used a local daycare centre's kitchen and hall. And the food was very high quality. It was what we would say was like restaurant standard food. During the pandemic, so in March 2020, we had to suspend our community cafe, which had run for 5 or 6 years on a Monday evening. And as well as the cafe, we'd have the Citizens Advice Bureau, we would have music, we would have workshops. But during the pandemic, we reinvented ourselves, firstly as a neighbourhood food service. So we worked with a local housing association, a local mental health charity, and another community development trust. And between us, we delivered, I think it's something like about 22,000 meals. All the meals which we cooked were vegan, using plant-based food. And these were delivered across a joint catchment area. And then last summer, we had lost our usual premises. We don't have our own kitchen and we were hiring in premises, but we do have an outdoor events terrace. And since May or June last year, we've been running for 6 months of the year an outdoor cafe on a Sunday afternoon, which is a free meal for people, or a pay what you can afford meal for people to come together and socialize and get good grub, basically. And because we have the outdoor space, that we're able to keep that going no matter what the COVID variants were at that stage. And then also during the pandemic, we started something. When the pandemic hit, we were trying to think, what can we do which we can keep going even during COVID restrictions? And one of the things we started but are now carrying on with is a seasonal veg box scheme. We have a community building and we have a member of staff who orders in veg directly from a wholesale veg supplier, bags them up into paper bags of a week's worth of fruit and veg, all of it choosing seasonal produce. And then people can register online, on phone or in person, and people pick up the veg in person, and we are delivering small numbers of the bags, but are hoping to also we're having e-cargo bikes where we want to roll that out. And it was a simple service we started initially during the pandemic, but actually for us helped us reach more people who weren't maybe just coming to the Sunday meal, also helped maybe people think around seasonal food and what is local. And relating back to what Irina said about dignity, even with the veg box, the feedback from the surveys we've had is that it's a very different feel from a normal food bank. Our member of staff treats everybody kindly and with respect. And there's also a pay what you can afford option. So we probably buy the veg boxes for maybe about £4 a bag, £4 or £5 a bag. it works out as at wholesale prices. In a supermarket, it would somewhere between 10 and 15 pounds a bag's worth of produce. People might chip in a quid, they might chip in a fiver, or some people, as their income goes up and down, can also pay more. And that aspect of it is pretty popular with people, given the option of paying it forward when they can. But there isn't any referral, there isn't any criteria, so people can self-refer and there's no assessment for us. And this, the funding for our food work is actually quite tight at the moment, but the veg box is actually cheaper for us to run than the cafe. We only need 1 member of staff, not 2, and they can sit in the office or sit in the meeting room and work between clients, so it's less labour intensive. And it's something which we're expanding as the cost of living hits. We were previously funded by the Scottish Government, and they commissioned us to do 2 evaluation reports, which are on our website, and I can certainly share with Clara and the team afterwards. One looked at the community cafe and veg box scheme as it relates to climate breakdown, and the other looked at a more general reflection of our community cafe model in the 5 or 6 years since it had been running. And we're an environmental charity. Our mission statement is linking the social well-being and the environment. So all our work, we try and make the linkages between environmental work and mental health work, environmental work and anti-racism work, and environmental work and anti-poverty work. And we're probably a little bit unusual in that we don't use fair share as a model, and we've never really engaged that widely with the fair share or intercepting supermarket food waste, because we prefer a model which is based on local produce and local food. And 30% of carbon emissions are caused by our food system. And we have a climate emergency. So there was a report in last week's Third Force News in Glasgow that Fair Share is struggling for supplies because actually supermarkets have been effectively cutting down on their food waste. So we don't think a model based on food waste, or what one of our researchers called waste food for waste people, is a really sustainable model. And also there's a quote there from within Helen's evaluation report about how intercepting food waste and having volunteers involved in taking away waste from the supermarkets, distributing it to people in need, is actually camouflaging the scale of the problem which supermarkets are causing, both in terms of poverty and climate breakdown. And there's a second quote there from Seasonal Produce, who are our Glasgow-based wholesaler who we use. And we used them a lot during the pandemic. And the feedback from them is that support from us and a few other community food organisations of actually buying in produce from a local independent retailer kept them going and kept their business surviving in what was a terrible time for the whole food retail industry. So again, our veg box model, similarly to maybe what Glenn Kens was saying about their own model, is about trying to break the reliance on the supermarkets as the only source of food for people in need. And we also have seen changes to the way that people eat. So the food which we provide for the first 3 or 4 years of a community cafe was entirely vegetarian, and for the last 3 or 4 years has been entirely vegan. The 2 chefs or 2 food workers we have both are vegan, and they create wonderful food on limited budgets, incredible home baking and lovely vegan food. And again, we've encouraged people to change their diets, not by lecturing or hectoring them, but by giving them really lovely food. And I think, again, that is one of, looking back to what Irina was saying around dignity, is that it's a way into having those discussions with people. And there's a quote there from Helen's research report, which says that our cafe model is about bringing people together from different backgrounds, and that again really helps in having those conversations and changing the way that people eat. In our survey with the veg box, we found that 90% of people who were receiving the veg box said that the scheme had stopped them from going hungry or reduced their pressure on the budget. 86% helped them to eat more healthily. And quite interestingly, over a third said it made a real significant difference to the way they eat. So maybe having the veg in their veg box, sorry, I'm just going to throw my cat out, I think, he's just come in. Having the veg in the veg box maybe meant that they cooked a healthier meal, that they didn't get a takeaway or a processed meal. It reduced the temptation of getting that cheap crap supermarket food by having that food there. And the veg box is also complemented by our cookery workshops and information resources, which we give people. The two reports which we published also had some conclusions, is that we know that there's a climate emergency. We know that the meat industry in the main, not as a whole, can cause more emissions of both carbon and methane, but policymakers have been very reluctant to promote alternative to meat-based diets. The main funding for food work is still very linked to fair share and the supermarkets. There's very little specific food funding which looks at directly plant-based work. There's very few food banks which we're aware of which are entirely vegetarian or vegan, despite the clear benefits for climate breakdown and health. And there's also clear benefits in terms of budget and the ease of storing food, which is not meat or dairy based as well. And our own food work, which we've been running for 6 or 7 years, shows that people with the right support, and I think particularly the holistic approach of maybe bringing food activists together alongside people who are living in poverty or asylum seekers or other people from different backgrounds, has shown that there's clear evidence that people are willing and wanting to change their diet and make healthier choices. And some broader conclusions from our research is that our own view as an organisation is that we need to be thinking differently than just supermarket food waste. Is it right that supermarkets rely on unpaid volunteers to distribute unwanted food to fridges and food banks, and don't meet the cost themselves of paying for that? Is it right that the Scottish Government give perhaps large sums of money to Fair Share as an intermediary, which could go directly to community food work? And as somebody who deals with fundraising on pretty much every day, is that when we had the COVID pandemic, we had a really quick response with funding. We had really emergency release of funding. We have an energy bill crisis, and we've seen a really quick, not a really quick response, but a response now where there is large sums of money going in to mitigate the costs of rising energy bills. But we're not seeing that with climate work. We're not seeing that with a move towards a climate friendly work. And I think as organisations are getting very insecurely funded, they're perhaps becoming more cautious and not wanting to speak out really about the crisis situation which people are facing. That's a wee taster of what we do, and if you're interested in finding out more both about us and Nourish, we're holding a joint event in a few weeks' time at the 2nd November, which is an in-person event, and tickets are £35, but there's also a pay what you can afford option. And we'll be presenting, Helen and Maggie will be presenting our research findings, and there'll be a panel of other organisations from both a local and national level and representatives of the Scottish Government, thinking about what policymakers at a local level, at a national level, can learn from food responses on the ground. And the keynote speaker at that conference is going to be Shona Robinson, who's the Cabinet Secretary for Local Government and Social Justice. And we've called it Food, Communities and Climate Emergency, 1 year on from COP26. This time last year, we were all hearing how wonderful Glasgow was in addressing food and climate change, but not a lot has changed on the ground in those 12 months. So again, it's as we come out, hopefully, of the pandemic and people have missed that opportunity to network and have those face-to-face meetings, we're hoping this conference will be an opportunity to sort of kickstart some important discussions. And if you want more information about our VegBox scheme, we're currently in discussion with our local Citizens Advice Bureau again about having a referral pathway between them so that they can refer people directly to us. But effectively, it's free for local people struggling financially. People collect mainly in person, and there's a very simple name number of staff who can accept the referrals on it. So we're quite a busy organisation, but we're quite proud of our food work. Irina was a wonderful cook when she worked with us and helped with the volunteers as well. So it was very nice to see that footage of the cafe in Irina's, and it was a time before the pandemic, and hopefully it won't be too long before we're back at full speed and everybody is doing that face-to-face work too soon. And I'll shut up now. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Tim. I was really inspiring. And actually both talks I found really inspiring. Thank you. Yeah, so we're going to move to questions in case anyone has any. Just like to say some of the things that I really was inspired by in both those talks. So those I found it with Irina that it was just I found it really powerful to reflect on how we feel when dignity has been taken away from us, even though there's times when I haven't maybe had that around food myself, that I think that it's something that everybody has had the moment where they felt that their dignity has been taken away from us. And so it was really helpful to really have that empathy with other people who are having those experiences. So yeah, that was something that I really took away from your talk. Thank you. And Tim, I was particularly inspired by just that it was all vegan, you know, and it's all fresh food. And I've heard other people saying, oh, you know, we've got all these community gardens who want to give fresh food to food banks, and food banks say they can't take it. And it's just great to hear that that's what you're doing. You're giving fresh fruit and vegetables to people. Just, yeah, there is just that barrier entirely removed, which is really inspiring. Thank you. Thank you both. And 22,000 meals, that's a lot. That's a lot of meals. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions at all?
Irina, you had your hand up there.
No, Lucy, I was just going to say it takes time. It's not that change happens all of a sudden. When we started with the cafe, we had like maybe 8 people coming in, and it's about consistency, about having the right space, the right environment to be inclusive, that people kept coming back and actually then trying the food. So it takes time, it takes love, it takes a bit of resources, and consistency. I mean, Tim will, within a year of that project, the board was a bit thinking, oh, maybe this is not working, but the volunteers really said something is changing. It just takes a bit of time. And then within like a year or so, we were feeding 80 people. So just continue.
Thank you. Leslie?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, both fantastic, inspirational talks, and great to hear. I had a couple of questions pop up when Tim was talking, and you did kind of answer one slightly. So for me, it's with the food hub, if we can get people to pay forward, how do we let the people know who need it get access to it? And you did talk a bit about Citizens Advice Bureau, but I mean, you know, we use community posters and Facebook and word of mouth, basically. Is there any more than that?
Yeah, 2 things in terms of the advantage we have is that we have the food isn't our only project. So we have a community building We have a community garden. So through that work, we've got a lot of partnerships. In terms of the veg box referrals at the moment, well, I've got a meeting on Wednesday with a local housing association, and a call with the Citizens Advice Bureau as well, who've got a new manager. So it's about those networks and those links in. But a lot of people find out about us. So we run a weekly baby group, or actually twice weekly baby group, and Xander, who does the veg box, went along to one of their group sessions and chatted to the mums, and some of those mums might be asylum seekers or migrant mums or people on low incomes. So because we're quite a well-established charity and we've got paid staff, then we've got that word of mouth reach for things.
Yeah, well, we'd like to connect with schools. So I guess that is, yeah, one way to get the word out and access people that we might not otherwise.
Yeah.
Is through using them as a collection hub, and also doing some food education, you know, with our producers for the school.
And it's the regularity of it as well, is kind of like things at a set date, at a set time, sort of keeping it simple as possible for people to access. Otherwise, it's like there is an online form which people fill in, but our member of staff could go over at the phone with them, or they could go in person, or keep it simple. We do have a pay it forward scheme for the veg box. It doesn't really pay it forward. So what pays it forward for us is more, we might get contracted by the housing associate. We do get contracted by one housing association to run an after schools club, and that makes a bit of profit. Or we've got a community building which we let out, and that brings in income streams. So we've got multiple income streams. But the veg box, we may, if we're really lucky, cover some of the cost of the veg, but we wouldn't cover the cost of the staff. So we're reliant on either grant income or increasingly partnership fees to meet the cost of the veg box. But we also so again, because we're a bigger organization, that gives us that flexibility of
what do you mean by partnership fees?
So like we are contracted to run our after school cafe. We're a local housing association, and they give us a grant of about £6,000 over the school year, and we do a once a week cafe for that. But that money goes into our unrestricted funds, and if we're quite careful in how we budget, we might save £500 or £600 of that, which we can plug the gap out. And so that is what has been successful for us in terms of keeping the food going. We were previously funded by Scottish Government funding and a number of resources, but we haven't really got any dedicated grant funding as it stands for the food work, although we've got applications pending. So having multiple income streams means that if we hit a time where our money, a certain project is down, then we've got that reserve or income can build up. But again, that's something which it's taken a while to build up. But
And one thing Lucy picked up on that I keep coming across is people's reaction to veg, and that they don't want it. They want something in a tin that they can just heat up in a pan because they don't know what to do with it. And so, I've been chatting to the lady that runs the local food bank about how we can do that. And ideally, I guess it is having a cafe where you can do cookery lessons and educate people. But is it because you've been there for the long haul that you've
but we've done other things, is like we did during the pandemic with Queen's Cross Housing Association. We did a flat pack meal thing, so it would be effectively soup in a bag. So we did that model with Queen's Cross, who are working in a different area, and that overcame some of that. During the neighbourhood food service, we actually gave out frozen meals, which and all the ones which we cooked were vegan, and the ones which our partners cooked weren't vegan. So again, it was a mixture. But again, it was having somebody who can give out we tips or messages. But again, it's sort of maybe plugging a gap thing. What other food work is there? Nobody else is doing this type of giving out this type of food in a locality. So But yeah, it takes time and takes conversations, but most people like a lentil soup, even if you're, so that's what I'm finding, or a potato and leek soup. So if it could be packaged up, or even some of the veg is ready chopped or something. But I do recognise that there are some people who like, if you've got limited cooking facilities or disabilities or whatever. But it's about partnering up as well. So we now share premises with Disability Scotland, who are a charity working with people who are blind and partially sighted, and we run a cookery, a cafe with them. And when we started, we were doing our normal type of food, but we've actually adapted it so they now get a soup and a toasty, because it's actually easier for people to hold than it would be if it wasn't. So it's about having those conversations and seeing what you can come up with.
Thanks. I think that's all my questions for now.
Paul put a question. Oh, did you want to answer that one, Irina? Paul put a question in the chat.
Sorry, I was just remember, Tim, do you remember we used to go to the local food bank in Maryhill?
Yeah.
And we used to basically make a very simple meal while people were coming to collect the food. And not just the fact that they were coming in and they were smelling some warmth and some kind of like nice smell, but also we were saying in the food bank you're able to get, I don't know, these lentils or this rice, but with those vegetables you can make this, and we will make a meal every time, and they will be taking the vegetables with the dry foods that they were getting, and they were able to observe how to make a very simple dish. They were able to take those vegetables with them, with the recipe. And it was just, I clearly remember that feedback where there was this guy who took the vegetables, and then the following week he was back and he basically said, you know, Irina, I think it was a broccoli soup or a broccoli pasta that we made, and I made the same broccoli pasta, and I was just so proud that I made it, and I invited my friend across the road from his flat, and we shared together. And that is the point about food. It's not just, you know, fuel or nutrients. It's about the enjoyment of having a nice warm meal and sharing it with somebody, and that's what good food brings. So it is possible. We did that in Maryhill, cooked while people were picking up their and also I remember there was like an finance advice service alongside. So yeah.
Thank you. So Paul's asking the question, do you think paid staff is an asset to your organisations?
Yes. We wouldn't be able to do what we're doing without paid staff. And I think also, why should we do things without paid staff as well? That there's certain community gardens I know in areas where you maybe have a very retired population and an older population haven't had, where I used to live in North Ayrshire was a fairly organics, which were really good, but had an older and largely retired demographic, and they were able to manage the garden. But I think if you look at, yes, we wouldn't be able to do with what we're doing without paid staff, which presents challenges, which like a lot what I do is a fundraising for it. But the other point I think is, well, we should be moving towards having paid staff in these jobs if we're taking the climate crisis seriously. It shouldn't be reliant on volunteers. I would say we started with, as I say, we started 12 years ago with 2 part-time staff, and a lot of our staff actually started as volunteers. Probably about 2/3 of the people working with us started as either volunteers or very sessional staff. So you can start small, and even getting the first time we got a paid gardener, we had a gardener for 6 months of the growing season, and then we got them for another 6 months, and it took them about 3 or 4 years before they were properly on the payroll.
And Irina?
We kind of like it, we are a slightly different organization. I mean, people that our colleagues from the poverty two communities, we wish we could pay them. They are dignity advisors. And we used to have a voucher scheme to say thank you for their time and commitment. But because the way we've been working over the last few years, where it's quite regular, the workshops that we run, the engagement with the training with local authorities, the nature of our work is quite regular. So then it becomes an employee relationship, but we are not able to pay because their benefits can be jeopardized, which is really unfortunate. But we try to be, you know, as creative as we can. I mean, these colleagues are here because they believe we need change. It's not that they do, you know, they come for the vouchers but we wish we could pay, but the benefit system doesn't make it possible.
And we still have lots of volunteers. Like we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing without volunteers, but we wouldn't be able to operate at the scale we do without paid staff to coordinate it. So I think you need both.
So on that, Tim, Paul's saying that they would like to get paid staff, but they're unsure on how to get the funding in order to get the paid staff.
I think every organisation is different. It depends on your constitution, if you're a charity or have you got a board of trustees, and that there are people like third sector. I'm more aware of what's not on in Glasgow, but like GCVS, Glasgow Council for Voluntary Service. There's a Dumfries and Glasgow third sector forum, I think, or third. There are who can look at your individual circumstances, but I think we started small. Before we ran our community cafe and a food work, I think we ran 6-week cookery classes, and then that grew into a cookery class, which we linked up with a night shelter. So again, starting small. So I think you just said you're just a community group. Often local authorities might have a small grant scheme where you don't have to be a constituted or a fully fledged group, and start small. Maybe like if you're a community garden, you want to get a gardener for a month or 6 weeks over the summer, is how I would start. And a lot of our projects have started like that, where we ran a pilot or we did a small scale work for 6 weeks and then scale up. Don't try and jump straight in with a big £20,000 project. Start with a 500 or a £1,000 project and see where you can go.
Roger's saying their community garden in Dumfries are trying to get people interested in coming along and growing fruit and veg, but are struggling to stir up much interest. So it's been our best harvest, but we're having problems getting our food to needy people. We're just not reaching the locals that may need help. I'm sure, you know, in North Dumfries, there's plenty of people who need that food.
I think it's about trying to find people who you can link up with, and like even if you just find one organisation who is the right one in that locality, that's what it is. So it's about having conversations on the ground. So we're lucky we work quite closely with our local housing associations, and that's been really useful at sort of reaching people in need, or local citizens advice bureau, or doing a one-off event. So it takes time, but it's different areas have got different makeup. So it's kind of I think, as Irina said, you can't do it all alone. So it's just sort of, and particularly if you're all volunteers, it's like, who is there in the area, who is doing that work, and have you got any people in common, or building up relationships. And I think over the last 2 or 3 years of the pandemic, it's become much harder. It's been harder to have those conversations when a lot of things have, even in Glasgow, not everything is fully reopened face to face.
We also suggest maybe getting in touch with the local GP practices, because we had a lot of referrals from the practices to kind of like social referrals. Just saying to the GP practices that you've got to veg at certain times. How can you reach the people, because they know. Yeah.
Or even just doing things like shove a table on the high street and give it away for free. So
And we do that even outside of the schools as well. That's something you can do.
I remember, I think Irina was at one event. I think when we opened our community building, you were giving out soup on the street just to draw people in. So again, it's sort of thinking around, not everybody's going to come to the community garden or that site, or but like where could you go in on the high street on a Saturday or wherever, and just sort of put up a sign saying free food.
Food outside of McDonald's. Excellent, perfect.
There is a little, I must say, a little stigma about free food. And I think one particular thing that was amazing about the Woodlands Cafe was that it was open to everyone. And then you didn't know who was food insecure or not.
Yeah.
And to have that mix of people was quite special. And yeah, that's why sometimes, you know, you will attract certain people, but not everybody. How can you do something that is like inclusive and there's not that kind of like, I don't know, charity element, and I think it's, in some ways is getting people to contribute, like feeling that they are part of the project, that they own the project. And that, I mean, in Woodlands, we had like so many volunteers, but they were not volunteers, they were contributing towards their community. So that makes, you know, a big difference. And you had a mix of people. I mean, there were like all sorts of people, and it was pretty good.
Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking, you said about going to doctor's surgery. I think Abby's been speaking with some different public health improvement practitioners, and there's in this area, they're not in every GP surgery, but there are some for the region. So yeah, I think we'd be able to put you in touch with them. Yeah, I'm still learning who's who and how to connect the different people, but that's yeah, that's someone who can help. So Leslie has another question. Do you have any advice on running a food cupboard or fridge in a village setting?
Yeah, it's not something which we've done. I mean, we did have a food pantry at our community garden, which was just a cupboard in the garden. We actually stopped it because we were getting quite random things donated. Again, my own feeling is kind of keep it simple and keep it seasonal, like, and find out what people want. We have a parents group at the moment, and we did a survey them about around what they wanted, and actually just food swaps were also quite helpful. So people who maybe want to just bring in food, and so again, it doesn't have to be as formal as collecting things from this. I see endless messages on Facebook with Macan and the volunteers saying, can somebody do the community fridge run this Thursday or whatever? And it's a lot of work for volunteers, particularly across Dumfries and Galloway, where there's quite a lot of travel between areas. But thinking around who's in that village and what have you got in your store cupboard, which you maybe no longer want, but is still, you do need to vet it a bit, otherwise you get half-eaten packets of things past their sell-by date. But apples at the moment, or crops and stuff. So but again, I think the advantage of other things is that a fridge, you don't necessarily have the social contact when people come to collect it. So where is that fridge based? So I know there's a really well-used one in Whitthorne at the reuse centre, but that's got a lot of other activity going on. It's got staff and volunteers there, so that feels much more like a social hub than it does like a fridge. But you can also access the fridge without people necessarily knowing, because it's in a semi-private bit of the building. But start small again is my advice with everything.
Mary?
Yeah, I would agree a lot with what Tim said about the downside of the community fridge. So at Whithorn, we collect from 4 different shops, 2 supermarkets and 3 supermarkets in Newton Stewart, and the co-op in Wigtown. So that basically means for the volunteers to go and collect the food is a 34-mile round trip. They do get reimbursed for the travel expenses, but you just get what you're given, really. So I would agree, not all of the stuff that comes to the fridge is necessarily what you would like to see eating as part of a healthy diet. I think the community fridge now has been going for about 3, maybe 4 years now, 3 years. As people have got more used to it, local gardeners with surplus veg have been contributing a lot to the fridge over the summer. So things like courgettes and tomatoes, apples at the moment, but pretty much anything. But the other initiative that we've started down here as well is plant and produce. Well, it started off as seeds, but seed, plant and produce swaps. And where they're concerned, there's no money changes hands whatsoever. Money is banned on the day. And people come with all kinds of things. There's no stigma. So if all you've got is a few empty egg boxes and you want to take, I don't know, a bag of apples home, that is fine. You just swap anything. So people swap all kinds of things, including cooked food, including homemade greeting cards, craft items, whatever, anything goes. So I think, you know, I think the community fridge has been quite good in terms of getting something going. But I do agree entirely with what Tim says about all of this in relation to climate change should not be put on the backs of volunteers. The way it is, the supermarkets have to start taking some real responsibility for this.
Thank you, Mary. That's, yeah, really useful. I had 2 other questions. One was, are the veg box, is that organic veg? And the other was, how do you involve people in decision making when you're given, is it a sort of standard box? Because when I used to get an organic veg box when I lived in Glasgow, it was the same, you know, everybody had the same box. So there wasn't really like a decision making, but it was something Irina said something about involving people in decision making. So I was curious about how that flows.
It's not organic, which is a sort of budget constraint for us, but it is seasonal and we sort of prioritize that over organic. We do also have, when the veg boxes are collected or veg bags are collected, we always have sort of extra veg on the side. And people, so like, might be extra apples, might be extra onions or whatever. And then people say, and Xander would say, do you want some extra of that? And there's scope, flexibility enough just for people to swap. And I think if you were maybe not so much maybe on your first visit, but if people come back and they say, I hate carrots, but I love broccoli, then maybe that's scope for that. But again, working with a seasonal produce and a wholesale provider, it's very easy to order. They supply the restaurant and cafe trade, and we basically the same as service as what they do for them. So you literally phone up the day before and leave a message on an answer phone with what you want. So it's actually very easy for us to swap. But we always have an extra box where people can choose extras, and then Xander will build up relationships with people over time. But yeah, with season, again, the emphasis for us is on seasonal produce rather than organic. And I think there's a whole separate discussion to be had around organics and versus non-organic and seasonal veg, but working on limited budgets, that's what we can afford, and also working on supplies, that's what we can afford as well.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Irina. I think we should, there's a few people needing to go, so perhaps, did you want to just summarise, Clara?
Yeah, that was great discussion, really interesting. So many interesting points as well brought up. thank you, Irina and Tim, for imparting your wisdom on us tonight. I think everybody has taken something away from that, definitely. Yeah, it's great. So next time we're hoping to do another online event, but we'll be putting it over to you guys to decide what and where you'd like us to go with the third online event. And then we've also got our first in-person event happening in November, both in Dumfries and Lucy, where was the other one going to be?
Somewhere in Wigtonshire. So I hopefully speak to people in the upcoming local food events to find out where would be preferable. Was wondering, you know, could be Stranraer, could be the Machers, Mary, if you would like.
Yeah. Just to give.
I said the Macca's would be good because it seems that Macca's has been missed every time.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's been 2 in the Stewartry, 1 in Stranraer, Dumfries, but the Macca's seems to have been forgotten. So if you could put it there, that would be fantastic. Especially as we've got Whithorn, you know, the South Macca's Community Centre.
That's yeah, that would.
I think Lucy, I think your decision's been made.
Thank you, Natalie. Support, yeah.
So we'll have 2 both in Dumfries and in the Macca's decided. And yeah, it'd be wonderful if you guys could join us. It'd just be to give everybody a chance to see where they want the community food network to go in the following year, where you want us to take it, really, and for you to have a chance to actually meet everybody in person. So yeah, just let other people know as well.
Did you have your hand up there, Mary?
Yeah, just very quickly, if we do have it in Whithorn, I would love Tim to come if he could and speak to us. I think it would be really good to hear what he's got to say.
Yeah, well, I'm in Wigtown. As I say, I work in Glasgow, but Irina was saying, why have you agreed to talk at this event tonight? You never agreed to talk at my events. And I was like, even though I'm working in Glasgow, I'm local, so I'm also interested in the food network. So if it fits in my diary, I'll see what I can do, but do keep in touch.
Yeah, we haven't got a date yet, so you know we can do that with Natalie and Mary and Tim.
Great. Lucy, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to meeting up. We just wondered if there was, it was just a comment, if anybody wanted to put in the chat or anything, what topic would you like us to explore? This was a really interesting conversation tonight, thanks to what was suggested last time around dignity and food provision. And so it would be great, you know, does anyone have any ideas about topics that you would like to hear more about, learn more about, or chat more about for future, either in the online or the in real life one?
And yeah, if you can't think tonight or on the spot, just email us over if you have any thoughts on that.
Definitely. Yes, you'll all have my email address by now and Clara's, so to get in touch.
Thanks, Irina and Tim and Lucy and Clara, and nice to meet everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Enjoy all the pool.